When I was coming down the slide, he said, "Hey, have you heard this song?" I just looked at him like a stranger. He started singing, "Just Come Along." I hadn't heard lyrics like that before, ones that praised the slacker, the one I'd been raised to abhor, and it struck me quite like a firecracker. I memorized all the words, and then 20 years later I still dwell in a world where whenever I hear it, I think of when I was introduced to the boy named Joel. I watched him bloody himself, fall off and break his arm. I was alarmed since I hadn't seen Joel fall into such a charm. He smiled as he recounted the deed, though to be real there were tears that day. Even though he'd like us to forget that, as if we hadn't seen his time of dismay, one's body can be broken and still they can have their pride not dispel. "No worries, it's only my bones," could only be said by one named Joel. One day Joel told us he'd changed, or at least his last name was another. When we asked him why he did it, from the truth he told us he was further. But I could appreciate the need for being fresh. I know a time or two I'd entertained the thought of burning my ID and all my cards, and become someone that was previously not. Except for him, I didn't notice a difference. Just a name easier to spell, so he didn't have to keep explaining himself to anyone other than he was named Joel. A paralyzed lizard climbed over a rock, chased a cricket for its dinner. Joel stomped on it, and I was ashamed at the laughter that arose from this sinner. To take a life is a sacred thing, but he responded animals are mechanical, and they were placed on earth for our desires. But I thought even if true, it's tyrannical. How do you treat what's under your feet, whether it's moving or just a shell? Though I never verbalized it properly, because it's not cool to disagree with the guy named Joel. He often tended to be quite cruel. In my direction, he'd throw an undercut and make me reconsider his company when I'd take another punch in the gut. Physical strength and size are the laws that govern small, tight communities, and Joel dominated in those categories, so I tried to escape when I had opportunities. He'd shove you in the ground for a nickel, and forsake you forever for a spell if it meant he might earn some quarter, because that's what it meant for him to be Joel. My tears dried when he packed his gear and said I'm moving over the hill, looking for something a little sweller, though to drop by I of course will. I enjoyed the peace and dreaded the war while he tried to rule from afar. His minions never mentioned him in absence, even though when he was close he was czar. I saw it took no power to betray, and it took infinity to keep people in a cell. This very important lesson about power and its relationships I learned from a man named Joel. When he started tinkering with tools, I knew we were all in for something. He had a taser that could shock you when it'd sneak up behind you. It'd give you a sting. For kicks, he'd get you to writhe on the ground and ruin your day by giving you a tattoo fashioned from his homemade gun that he made in his kitchen with a leftover screw. He'd draw anything you wanted if you just paid for one night in a sleazy motel. I'd never considered that mistakes could be permanent until I met the boy named Joel. Years later, I'd nearly forgotten about Joel and everything he used to do, but someone told me he was married to a nice girl everyone wanted to pursue, and that he'd traded his usual polo shirt for a white lab coat and long list that he'd used to sort out patients and their L's, aches, wells, and cysts. I was glad that he was happy, but mainly thought of what I had to sell. To end up with a plot twist like that, the story of a man named Joel. He got into a very serious car crash. I don't know if he was driving too fast, drinking too much, distracted, or on hash, but reconstructive surgery was floated and they thought he might never be the same. I guess I decided to calm a bit and stop and take stock of what happened, but the facts I can't omit. He returned with a stronger vigor. Maybe a person can't make their spirits quell. You can't lock up what you are, who you become. Just another lesson I learned from a man named Joel. His name crossed my mind the other day. I realized I no longer cared. It felt like a lifetime ago, and perhaps I should be happy I got spared. Whatever he's doing now is fine, as long as it's something I don't see. Whenever it comes my turn to speak, my only wish is for him to be absentee. I hope to never see him again. He can have heaven or have hell, as long as I get to keep the earth away from the one who's named Joel.